Nebraska has had a rough go-around over the course of the last few years. However, in the 1990s they were the pinnacle of college football, a dynasty, and the 1995 Nebraska Cornhuskers is a shining example of that. The 1995 Nebraska Cornhuskers is truly one of the greatest college football teams ever. Let me break this down for you. They outscored their opponent 638 to 174. That's a 464-point differential. I'm not very good at math, but I think that's pretty good. The smallest margin of victory was 14 points. They only trailed once all season. They give up zero quarterback sacks. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, oh, they must have played a bunch of cupcakes. Well, that cannot be farther from the truth. They beat four teams that finished in the AP top 10. Now, in order to fully break this down, I need to rewind the clock back a bit, back to 1993. The 1993 Nebraska Cornhuskers were coming off a little bit of a disappointing season in 1992, which they lost three games, including a loss to Florida State to cap off the season. The 1993 season would go on to go a little bit differently for Nebraska, as they'd win every single regular season game. The postseason, however, was eerily similar, as they would go on to play Florida State in a bowl game, this time the national championship game, and of course, much like the previous season, they would lose to Florida State, this time off of a last-second heartbreaking field goal that happened with 21 seconds left to lose. The 1994 team would go on to do what the 1993 team couldn't do, and that was win a national title and finish the season undefeated at 13-0. Needless to say, the 1995 team would come into the season with a lot of expectations. They'd won 13 consecutive games and 24 of the last 25 games. However, the 1995 team lost a lot of key players off the 1994 team, and were in a lot of ways a team that looked very different from the previous year's team. The Huskers lost four out of the five starting offensive linemen, with Rob Zatechka, Joe Wilkes, Zach Wiegert, and Brendan Sty all departing following the season. The sole returning starter was Aaron Graham. The defensive line saw similar departures, as Donta Jones, Terry Corneli, and Dwayne Harris, three of the four starters along the defensive line, all departed, with Christian Peter being the lone remaining starter. The Huskers also lost a really good pair of linebackers from Troy Dumas and Ed Stewart, along with a pair of really good DBs in Baron Myers and Kareem Moss. It, however, wasn't all bad for the Huskers, as Tommy Frazier, a guy who had started bits and pieces of the last few seasons and had come into 1994 as one of the Heisman favorites before being sidelined with a blood clot, was back. The guy that came on a relief for Frazier and ended up leading the Huskers to a national championship, and Buck Behringer was also back at quarterback. Huskers would also return star running back Lawrence Phillips and the second, third, and fourth leading receivers in Phillips, Reggie Ball, and Mark Gilman. Phil Ellis and Doug Coleman, who rotated at middle linebacker, were back, as were cornerbacks Tyron Williams and safety Tony Valland. The Huskers brought back some really solid players, but the team also had some controversy surrounding it. Lawrence Phillips really struggled with his demons off the field. Less than 2 weeks following the 1994 national championship, Phillips pleaded not guilty to charges of assault, vandalism, and disturbing the peace. These charges stem from an incident in March of 1994. Phillips' eligibility also came into question after he allegedly received a $100 lunch from a sports agent during the 1994 season. He'd been ruled eligible just in time for the season to begin. The Huskers also had a different kind of controversy, a quarterback controversy. Now, on paper, you would think this is a pretty easy choice. Tommy Frazier was the previous year's national title game MVP, an all-Big 8 quarterback, a preseason Heisman and Davey O'Brien candidate, and all around one of the most electric players in college football. Behringer won every game he started. He led the conference in passing efficiency, and he added more to the passing game than Frazier, and all around, he was really well respected by his teammates. Legendary head coach Tom Osborne took his decision down to the wire, naming Frazier the starting quarterback a little bit more than a week before the opener against Oklahoma State. The Huskers season was ready to rock and roll, as they came into the season ranked second in the nation behind only Florida State. And the season did indeed come out of the gate rocking and rolling, as they're going to dominate Oklahoma State, beating them 64-21. They would put up 671 total yards of offense, including 513 rushing yards. The new offensive line consisting of Chris Dishman, Steve Ott, Aaron Taylor, Eric Anderson, and the sole returning starter Aaron Graham didn't look too shabby. The Blackshirts dominated the Cowboys' offense. Oklahoma State only had negative 15 yards of total offense on the first three drives of the game. Junior college transfer linebacker Taylor Farley also emerged as a potential star for this defense. Game 2, Nebraska took on the Michigan State Spartans, who were led by some relatively unknown first-year head coach by the name of Nick Saban. All the Huskers would do is give Saban one of the worst losses of his entire illustrious career, pounding them 50-10. This was even with star quarterback Tommy Frazier going down early in the second quarter with a bruised thigh. Lawrence Phillips would rush for 206 yards and 4 touchdowns, and the Huskers would outrust the Spartans 552-45. This was Michigan State's worst loss since 1983. Of course, the Huskers would win this game, but they would experience another loss, as Phillips once again was arrested. These crimes were pretty severe, and they happened just following the game against Michigan State. Phillips broke into backup quarterback Scott Frost's apartment, proceeded to assault his ex-girlfriend by dragging her by the hair down 3 flights of stairs and then smashing her head against a mailbox. This is a pretty despicable incident, and as a result of it, Tom Osborne suspended Phillips for 6 games. The Huskers would have to move forward without Phillips, and they would, as they would clobber Arizona State, beating them 77-28. Phillips' replacement Clinton Childs would rush for 143 yards and 2 touchdowns before leaving the game in the second quarter with an injury. Ahman Green would come on in relief and rush for 111 yards and 2 touchdowns on just 13 carries. Needless to say, the running back room didn't really miss Phillips, and as a whole, the team scored 63 first-half points, a school record. This was against a pretty talented Arizona State team that consisted of players like quarterback Jake Plummer, linebacker Pat Tillman, and wide receiver Keith Poole. The next game, the Cornhuskers were so good, it would cause an entire football program to fold. Well, that's not really true, but this was the final season of Pacific football, and the Cornhuskers did beat them 49-7 and put up 731 total yards of offense. This really was pretty tame for the 1995 Cornhuskers, especially when considering the fact the team they played didn't even exist the following year. The following week posed a little bit more of an issue for the Cornhuskers. Up to this point, the Huskers had not trailed all season long. Washington State got out to an early 7-0 lead. Nebraska, of course, was able to overcome this deficit and ended up winning the game 35-21 against a Washington State team that was pretty feisty this game. Glenn Wistrom continued to prove to be a very valuable asset for the Black Shirts defense as he recorded 4 tackles for a loss. Up next was Missouri, and that wouldn't prove to be much of a challenge as the Cornhuskers would blow them out 57-0. The Huskers forced 5 fumbles and had 2 interceptions. Missouri only had 39 yards rushing on 39 carries. The following game looked to be more challenging as the Kansas State Wildcats, led by head coach Bill Snyder, came into the game ranked 8th in the nation. The Huskers made quick work of the Wildcats, however, taking a 35-6 halftime lead. They won in some unusual ways given their style of football as Frazier passed for 148 yards and 4 touchdowns. The Huskers were going to win the game 49-25, and Kansas State would finish the regular season ranked 7th in the nation by the AP poll. The following week was against Colorado, who's ranked 7th in the nation. They would make quick work out of Colorado as Ahman Green would rush for a 57-yard touchdown on their very first play from scrimmage. This would go on to set the tone for the game as Nebraska would beat Colorado 44-21. This Colorado team would go on to finish ranked 5th in the nation by the AP poll. The following week, Nebraska took on Iowa State, and this would be the game Lawrence Phillips would return. In Phillips' return, they had rushed for 624 yards. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, wow, Phillips must have been a star of that game. He must have rushed for a lot of yards. But the reality is, he only rushed for 68 yards and 12 carries. Ahman Green was the real star of the game, rushing for 176 yards and 3 touchdowns. Behind this furious rushing attack, they had gone on to win 73-14. The following game was at Kansas, who's ranked 10th in the nation and who up to this point had yet to lose a home game on the season. The Jayhawks played hard and actually outgained the Huskers 199-110 yards by halftime and had 10 more first downs. Despite this, the Huskers were up 14-3 at halftime, went on to dominate the second half to win the game 41-3. As a result of the win, Nebraska would clinch the Big 8 championship for the 5th year in a row. Up next was a rivalry game against a very bad Oklahoma team which had been 5-4-1 up to this point. The Huskers were 30-point favorites, and if you bet the over, you would have cashed in as the Cornhuskers dominated the Sooners, beating them 37-0. Still, this score isn't necessarily a good reflection of the game, as the Sooners played the Huskers pretty hard. In fact, the Huskers only had a 13-0 lead at halftime. By his lofty standards, Frazier kind of struggled, only going 12 for 25 for 136 passing yards with one touchdown and one interception. Still, the defense came up clutch, forcing three turnovers, including two of which that went for touchdowns. The Huskers ended the regular season averaging 52.4 points per game, which was an all-time record in college football. The national championship was finally here, and the Cornhuskers were set to take on the Florida Gators, led by head coach Steve Spurrier and Heisman Trophy winner Danny Warfield. Florida had rolled through their schedule up to this point, including victories over a Peyton Manning-led Tennessee Volunteers team and a very good Florida State team. The Huskers were going to absolutely dominate, beating the Gators 62-24, which was the largest margin of victory ever in the national championship history, till Georgia broke it in 2023. This team has been acclaimed as one of the greatest college football teams of all time, and that is with very good reason. This team may have not had a whole lot of players that went on to light it up in the NFL, but they played as a team, and they were led by elite coaching.